Hello everyone. Today we are going to try and finish up the series on World War I, and this video, strap your boots on, is probably going to be fairly long. Just be prepared for that. Okay, the Eastern Front is where we left off with Russia, Tsar Nicholas II, the last Tsar before he is overthrown and the communists take over. Russians had to retreat from the Germans, especially initially, with huge losses. They're beginning to win in Austria-Hungary. They capture over 200,000 Austrians. Austria-Hungary lose 1 million men. Russia also loses 1 million. I mean, we've got World War I is just filled with these catastrophic, mind-bending numbers of casualties. And then to add to it, the end of this conflict, you have the Spanish flu that goes through and ravages and kills 50 to 100 million people as well globally. I mean, between World War I and the Spanish flu, just millions and millions of people dying. This time in human history was just absolutely horrific. Getting back on track though, in Serbia by November 1915, Serbia is conquered by Austria. Bulgaria joins the Central Powers. Romania's armies are destroyed. There's changes that are happening, but not significantly enough to push for one side or the other to actually win the conflict. This is Tsar Nicholas II. Okay. So here you have the Eastern Front. You've got Poland, Germany, Austria-Hungarian Empire, and then Russia holding this line here. So the Russians initially come in, they lose territory, head back, and then they're pushing into the Austro-Hungarian territory here. You see the same type of map here. This is this black zone is changes in what's going on with the line. Russian territory, which is then seized by Germany. Austrian territory is seized by Russia down here. Lines are moving on the Eastern Front, but it's still a giant line where people are dug in trenches and fighting and dying over these no-man land areas. Okay. The British naval blockade in the North Sea to try to prevent Germany from basically getting supplies, sending supplies, attacking the British or their allies in this fight in the North Sea. The German U-boats, like I said in the last video, were the most terrifying aspect of naval warfare, especially for the triple entente and the British, to be more specific, but then the Americans as well. But not enough to do major damage. It was more psychological than anything else. Supplies are not getting into Germany, and the idea is to cut off Germany and its allies from any supplies, to essentially starve them into giving up. By 1916, Germany is suffering from food shortages and other supplies. May 1915, U-boat without warning torpedoed a British passenger liner, the Lusitania. 1,198 passengers died, including 128 Americans. And this is one of the events that starts tipping America towards actually entering the war. America, trying to adhere to the Monroe Doctrine, had a policy of standoffishness and not wanting to actually enter into a European conflict. There was a huge part of the population that was completely against us going into World War I and World War II as a result of this. we end up going into both world wars, but something had to happen on the other side to bring us into the conflict. This is one of those things where a number of Americans died, and it's one of those like, hey, Americans are now dying in this fight. It's time for us to get involved. President Woodrow Wilson warned Germany to leave passenger ships and neutral ships alone. Germany agreed for the time being, and then they later on started attacking them. So here you have that naval blockade. Okay, you've got Germany here, and they're trying to box Germany in as many ways as they can to prevent them from getting supplies in or out. There's a U-boat. And Lusitania. That's an artist's rendering, actually. It's not a photograph. It's a large passenger ship. Final stages of the war. On the Western Front, the Germans made strategic retreat to better fortify positions. This came to be called the Siegfried Line. Siegfried is a character in Germanic mythology. In April 1917, the French threw the last of their strength in this line in a futile attempt to smash through, and they were slaughtered. This is pretty indicative of the entire war. It's the military commanders on both sides just continued to throw men at the front, hoping that they were going to be the ones to break through. And there were small, short victories, but I mean, this is kind of how this war played out. It's you win a couple miles maybe, and for what cost? Okay, the French soldiers, sick of being ordered to charge into certain death, they're on the verge of mutiny. This is happening all over Europe. No, this is not just in France. This is in Russia. This is in Germany. This is in, with the English soldiers, etc. French commander was replaced by the hero Verdun, Petain. I believe that's how Petain. I don't know. These names are difficult for me. He restored order and confidence, mainly by promising that there would be no more offensives. This would be left to the British. In other words, the French are like, you know what? We're not going to be doing any more of this attacking. We're just going to sit in our lines and defend from now on. The British still believed they could smash through the German lines, and so they continued to try it. Their last offensive under General Haig became. Sorry, these videos are hard. I'm trying to talk as fast as possible. Began on July 1917 and lasted for 3 months. I believe this is pronounced the Battle of Passchendaele. Not exactly positive on that one. So pouring rain turned the battlefield into a muddy swamp. Many soldiers are drowning in the trenches with these torrential rains. And then as you're trying to sprint across no man's land, you are sinking in artillery holes, and your progress is slowed. And if your progress is slowed, you're an easy target for a machine gun. It was just an absolutely terrible idea. The British failed miserably. Okay, this is that Siegfried Line, and the Maginot Line is the French and British line in the Northern Territory, where they're trying to hold them off, trying to stay out of Belgium. So at least this, as far as the French and English are concerned, because it's supposed to be an independent nation, Luxembourg as well. Okay, Eastern Front. By April 1917, the Triple Entente has lost a key member. The Russian people suffered greatly from food and heating, fuel shortages, and enormous battlefield casualties. You've got a lot of death, but I mean, we tend to shrug off things like a heating fuel shortage, but please remember that this is Russia. I had a friend who was in Moscow a few years ago doing a study abroad program, and It was negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit for a week or two during the wintertime. Um, I mean, people were just freezing and dying out on the street, like literally becoming frozen. I mean, it was just absolutely crazy. And this is in a time where people had, fuel and things to heat their home with. So having a heating shortage in some places like California doesn't really seem like that big of a deal. But in Russia, I mean, this is a big deal. And then obviously people can't live without food. And again, just like with the French and the English, the Russians had kind of lost hope in their military commands at this point. They blame Tsar Nicholas, correctly so, and they revolt. He's removed from power and the government was in chaos. This is the beginning of what is called the Russian Revolution. And you've got people like Lenin who come into power, as well as a number of other individuals. The first government is actually a democracy in Russia, but the communists take over after that. We'll talk about that in greater detail in the next unit. Germany has a secret weapon to use against Russia. They knew the Russian revolutionary leader was trapped in Switzerland, Lenin. They knew they could do great damage if he got home. This is Lenin, student of Karl Marx, the founder of communism. In 1917, communism had never been tried. This is a new experiment, and honestly, it's a great idea where you have everyone who's doing what they are best at to work for the betterment of mankind, but that experiment was an abject failure. Instead of dissuading and putting off tyranny, you ended up with one of the most tyrannical systems that has ever existed in the world. Again, we'll talk about that in the next unit on the rise of totalitarian regimes. Okay, Lenin returned to Russia. He had a 7-month uprising, took control of the government, stopped the war with Germany. Russia had to give up enormous amounts of land. New nations were created: Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Finland land was enlarged. Poland existed once more. Germany had freed millions of soldiers to fight on the Western Front. France and England cannot stop Germany. I mean, so all of a sudden, the German lines double on the Western Front, and that alliance is in a very precarious situation. But the United States enters the war. Americans saw Germany as the aggressor due to the Lusitania event, and in 1917, Germany returned to torpedoing passenger liners again. And there's this incident with the Zimmerman telegram. So the Germans sent a secret message to Mexico offering land, like the United States, to Mexico if they would go to war with the United States. So they were trying to get Mexico to fight the United States, and then they were offering to give them that territory essentially if they conquered the United States. We get hold of this, and it's one of the things. It's like, no, actually, they're trying to, plot our demise, and it's one of the main reasons why the United States ends up going to war. German U-boats sink several U.S. cargo ships. And on April 2nd, 1917, President Wilson asks Congress to declare war, saying the world must be made safe for democracy. This is Wilson giving his address to Congress. On April 6th, Congress declared war, stopped war, and he started war with Germany. That's a typo there. Russia had to give up this. Okay. There's some typos here. So Congress declared war. Russia stopped war with Germany. Russia has to give up North, so that's land. We went over that already. need to fix that for next time we do this. Finland's land isn't large, but existing again. The U.S. is totally unprepared for this type of warfare. Anti-war feeling is very high. Our army is at 126,000, where you have like 500,000 versus 500,000, like in places like Somme. I mean, our numbers are pitiful for our army in comparison to the European counterparts. Our factories are not producing war materials, and the United States reinstates the draft. Age ranges in 1917, 21 to 30 years old. In 1918, it's dropped to 18 up to 45 years old. Volunteers would include many women who went to work as nurses and desk clerks. Women were not allowed to be on the front lines at this point as a combat soldier, but they did absolutely serve in the war. The army grows to 5 million. So from 126,000 to 5 million in 2 years. 2.3 million were drafted. So there was a lot of volunteers as well. Troops were sent in giant transport ships surrounded by battleships. Pershing was the American commander. First troops arrive in June of 1917, and Pershing sets up Supreme War Council to plan strategy. So you've got these large ocean liner transports. They're transporting troops across, and it's very similar to what we do today. The majority of soldiers that end up in combat zones are either they might be flying, but a lot of them also travel via things like aircraft carriers. The Germans and Americans are racing to build up strength in numbers. Early 1918, the Germans launched 3 big attacks. March on Paris, huge losses. Again, every time someone goes on the offensive, it's just awful. They ended up getting pretty close. They stopped 75 miles from Paris, and they start shelling Paris with these giant artillery pieces that they develop. Then the United States counterattack, smashed through their lines, and this is the Second Battle of Marne. 900,000 U.S. troops are involved. Germany ends up being forced to surrender because they've lost the battle of attrition. Their push on Paris is kind of the last hope. Like, this is the last of their supplies for full-scale war like they've been waging. The last hope of real victory, and they're running out of supplies. Germany is forced to surrender. Bulgaria surrenders. The Ottoman Empire surrenders. Austria-Hungary does the same. The German people are starving. They overthrow the Kaiser. November 11, 1918, Germany ends up surrendering. There's a ceasefire. This is one of the big Berthas. When I say large cannon, I mean large cannon. The Western Front, with the U.S. participation, so they're getting pushed back, and then in the Second Battle of Marne, they're pushing them back the other way. Germany surrenders. Okay. Consequences of World War I. Casualties: 10 million soldiers died. This is more deaths than all previous wars of the last 100 years combined, globally. Estimated that another 10 million civilians died. And then when you add to the Spanish flu in 1918, 1919, you add 50 to 100 million to this number in these years. Cost $337 billion, what equivalent to across all the countries. 10 million per hour, 167,000 per minute, $2,783 per second. Where does that money come from? Oh, this is just in the United States. The U.S. tax everyone extremely high, borrows money, goes deeply into debt. So a lot of countries, this is the global conflict. This is how the U.S. dealt with it. A lot of countries like Germany ended up just printing a bunch of money. Like, here's all this free money. The problem being is it deflates the currency, causes huge problems. When we talk about World War II, I'll show you some pictures of people with wheelbarrows full of money that they're bringing into stores to buy like a loaf of bread. It's crazy. After World War I, Wilson has a 14-point plan saying that no one is going to take the blame for World War I. Everyone's going to work together to rebuild Europe. Any conquered ethnic group can be self-governing. They meet at Versailles. Wilson presents this plan, and no one goes for it. And they instead punish Germany heavily. The other losers in the war as well, but Germany came out really the big loser in this one. Four nations came to predominantly lead this meeting at Versailles. Out of the 32, they agreed to have a majority vote. The other three voted to scrap Wilson's 14 points. Okay, they replaced it with the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, so the Treaty of Versailles, Germany's going to take full responsibility, give up territory, Belgium, Denmark, Poland, France, Alsace-Lorraine, that territory. France controlled Germany's main coal fields for 15 years. Allied armies would occupy territory west of the Rhineland for 15 years. Germany would be reduced in size to a size of a police force. Their army would turn over war materials to the Allies, including the Navy, was turn over livestock to the Allies. Please keep in mind they're starving. Germany will pay $33 billion in reparations. Half of all German factory output will go to the Allies. When Hitler rises to power, okay, the German people felt like they had been treated unfairly and that they were being stretched beyond their means to do so, and all of their pride had been stripped away. So when someone comes in and talks about this and explains this grand plan, how he's going to solve all their problems and give them pride again, it's no wonder that they voted him into power. Would that the Allies had adhered to Wilson's 14 points, the Second World War might not have ever happened. We can't completely speculate, but I mean, there's a good chance that there might not have ever been a way for Hitler to rise to power without the Treaty of Versailles. We'll talk about that more in that unit. Okay. So this is that meeting, the Treaty of Versailles. Okay. Other changes: Austria-Hungary will split up. Austria-Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia are still split up. Not completely like this, but similar. The Ottoman Empire is split up into multiple pieces: Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. Okay, before and after. So you got these large empires that are being split up. I don't have the Ottoman Empire in this, but they're being split up as well. And thus concludes the discussion on World War I. World War I was absolutely terrible, one of the most catastrophic and terrible wars that has ever been fought in the world. And had we learned some lessons, and we should learn some lessons for World War I about, one, the type of things that should never be allowed in warfare, like chemical weapons, but also how to treat losers with grace, in order to not create an enemy that lasts for 1,000 years, or even next generation who ended up starting another world war or something crazy. So yeah, we will pick this up again in our next unit about the rise of totalitarian regimes. Thanks everyone. Bye.